Hey there, everybody. Pete Pardo here from Sea of Tranquility. Welcome to another edition of Ranking the Albums. Today, in the co-captain's chair on a Ranking the Albums show for the first time in quite a while, Mr. Chris Alo. What's happening, my friend?
Hey Pete, how's it going? Thanks for having me as always.
You got it,
Hey
man.
everybody out there.
We switch gears from the Monsters Den into Ranking the Albums. So today,
Yeah.
at long last, we've only been talking about doing this one for an eternity. Celtic Frost or Celtic Frost, however you decide to say it. I don't know what is the
Your
absolute.
preference.
Yeah, I don't know what is right or wrong. Although,
I mean, it does appear to be Celtic, so that's why
yes,
when I was a kid, it was Celtic
we all
Frost.
said Celtic, right? Yeah, but
Yeah,
Mr. Reed St. Mark, one of the drummer from the classic lineup of the band, told me many times it's Celtic, it's Celtic. So I'm like, okay, hey, I will
right.
take that. That's fine. So that's what I've been saying ever since. But I was just as guilty saying Celtic for many years.
Right.
But so we do realize that there is a lot of different releases, kind of under the Celtic Frost family. Right, we've got Hellhammer, we've got Triptychon, there's all sorts of weird stuff. Today, for this episode at least, we're just going to concentrate on the 6 full-length studio albums from Celtic Frost, and we're cheating a little bit here because their actual debut, Morbid Tales, was kind of an EP, but
Right.
here in North America, they beefed it up with the tracks from The Emperor's Return to make it a full length.
Exactly.
So basically, Morbid Tales, as
Hey,
we're going to
we're in
talk about,
America,
we're in
so it's
America,
our
so
rules.
we could. That's our rules. We're going to do it this way. So Morbid Tales is going to be included here as one of the 6, and
Yeah,
basically the Morbid Tales that we know included Emperor's Return. I will say that Emperor's Return album cover was always pretty sensational, right?
amazing,
Yeah, I
amazing.
remember buying that. And I was like, oh, this is awesome, right?
I was gonna say, but before we went on air, I just told Pete I just got that as a T-shirt, and I meant to wear it for the show, but of course I have too much junk, so I lost it in the black hole of stuff that follows me around. So
It'll show up like two
I'll
weeks from
probably,
now.
yeah, 2 weeks from now I'll wear it on an episode of Monsters Den because I'll find it.
Yeah, or the Hudson Valley Squares. Either way, it'll be cool
Yeah,
to see. So yeah,
either way.
cool. So like I said, we got 6 albums here. We're going to work our way from 6 all the way to number 1. Chris is going to kick us off with his number 6.
Okay, cool. Yeah, this one was a really tough one, Pete. Even though I think it's the smallest ranking I've done with you, to me, and I love this band. I just had I'm still looking at the discs, going, I have such a tough time because to me, there's a clear cut top 3 and a clear cut bottom 3, and I had a tough time in the subsets. And I'll be honest, right now I'm still struggling with the bottom 3 because I like parts of each and I really dislike parts of each. Um, and I guess I'm going to go with this one. This is absolutely the whipping boy of the discography, but it's still not terrible. It's still got some really good stuff that I do like. Of course, I think what really killed it was the band's image, and it's 1988's Cold Lake. This is an original CD, not a bootleg. I do remember I used to help out I was 17. I used to help out at a local radio station in 1988 that did like metal stuff. And I would, answer phones and for contest giveaways. And I remember the guy from Noise Records passed by the station, and he handed me an advanced cassette of Cold Lake. And he's like, yeah, check it out. And I remember listening to it, and I was like, wow, yeah, it's definitely different. There's some heavy stuff, but the lyrics are terrible. There's some poppy stuff to it. But then within a few weeks, I saw pictures of the band, and I was like, holy shit. And I don't know if you can see it really on the glare is fucking terrible. Plus the 1988 photography is. But anyway, the band, for those who don't know, Celtic Frost was one of the godfathers, one of the originators of black metal, for lack of a better term, dark and heavy and gothic, and their music touched a great deal. And in 1988, they definitely went in a softer direction, but there's still some good songs, some heavy guitars. It's not an awful record, but it was such a shock to the system. I think the look and it's to this day considered one of the biggest mistakes in the history of rock and roll, because up till that point they were on an upward trajectory, and
Oh, yeah.
this just killed them. And I guess they recovered for the reunion, but this effectively put it into the band.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely killed them at that point in time in their career, and there was really no coming back from it. And it's a shame because the album that we followed with is actually pretty damn good. But I think at that point in time, people were like, Celtic Frost, Cold Lake, forget it. It's my number 6 as well. I never bought it, okay, because I remember I knew someone who had it back in the day, and I was like, because I was a big fan, and I love those early records, and I was like, what the hell is this? In revisiting it all these years later, it's still a huge mistake, right?
Oh, absolutely. Any way you slice it.
Any way you slice it. It's, you know what? If there's no Celtic Frost name on it and it's something else.
Maybe they would have just called the band Cold Lake.
Cold Lake. And it's just,
I think too, the image was such a killer. I mean, to go from, the studs and leather of 1981 Judas Priest and Iron Maiden, and then Venom, to then they went to the gothic stuff and into the Pandemonium, which was still fine and still respectable, but then with teased hair and makeup and suspenders and lipstick, I mean, it's like, oh God, this is just you killed the band. And Tom G. Warrior does blame the whole thing on his girlfriend at the time. It's just but it's still, the songs are not awful. It sounds good. It's just, had it been like a side project like Mantis did, like Mantis from Venom did a solo record, which was a poppier, I can't even remember the name of the album, but you couldn't kill Venom because it wasn't under the Venom title.
Right. But
maybe that's what they should have.
They absolutely should have. I mean, first of all, there's the look, right?
Yeah.
Second of all, I mean, Blood on Kisses.
Yeah.
Cherry Orchard, Seduce Me, Pretty Obsession. I mean, the song titles are terrible.
Oh yeah, they're such cock rock. Yeah.
It's so bad. And I will say there's some good guitar work. What the hell's the name of that guy? Oliver Amberg is the name of the lead.
I think that was it, right?
I mean, because this band was never known to have like virtuoso guitar work on. I mean, Tom is just I probably plays the same as like I do. I'm not a good guitar player either, but that's okay because it fit the music. Totally. And now all of a sudden you've got these big kind of 80s Van Halen style guitar licks and riffs and solos, and the guitar work's pretty impressive. But it's not Celtic Frost.
No.
And what kills this album for me, his vocals.
Yeah.
To me are absolutely dreadful on this album, and they're really up front in the mix, and just Tom trying to sing this type of like 80s pop metal, glam metal stuff, it just doesn't work. To me, it doesn't work, and that's what ruins this album. I find the vocals absolutely horrible, and it just can't, like you said, there are a handful of songs on here that like they're decent, right? The riffs are good, it's kind of heavy, fast-paced up-tempo stuff, but it's not Celtic Frost. And then you got him trying to sing like a hair metal singer, and that's not Tom.
Yeah, I mean, he did all these interviews where his hair was big and teased, and he proudly wore an LA Guns t-shirt and skin tight pants, and it's like, wait a second, I still got the copies of Kerrang where this guy's in head to toe leather and spikes,
singing about the dawn of Megadu 2 years before, and now all of a sudden it's like, hey, downtown Hanoi, Roosevelt, woo, and it's just, I don't know what kind of line of bullshit his girlfriend at the time was feeding him, but this was
she must have been fucking
disaster.
She must have been fucking gorgeous, Pete. Holy shit, she must have had that. Pardon my French. She must have had that golden pussy or something, because Jesus Christ, I mean, to slit your own throat, to literally kill a promising career.
Yeah. Because I mean, Celtic Frost were becoming like the darlings of the avant-garde metal scene.
Absolutely.
I mean, they were, forerunners of a lot of what came afterwards, and it's funny because it almost like made their whole career a joke, even though you've got these highly influential albums that came before it. So, anyway, all right. So we got Cold Lake out of the way. Now it gets better from here, right? So, what do you got?
It definitely does. All right,
Next.
so my next one again, and this was a bit of a struggle. Which one I wanted to go with next for the for number five, and I listened to them both again last night, and this could be somewhat controversial because some people think this is their masterpiece, but when we talk vocals, that's what kills it for me for this record, and it's Into the Pandemonium. This one's sealed. I have another one that's not sealed, but you could tell I don't really like this album because this is the remastered version with the bonus track that I've had a couple of years, and I didn't even fucking open it. I remember picking this up in 1987 and putting the needle on, and the first song is a fucking cover of Mexican Radio from Wall of Voodoo. I was like, what? I'm like, what the fuck is this? And then I just hate the vocal style on like half of this record. It's like Tom G. Warrior sounding like a constipated Bob Dylan. Like Bob Dylan on the mesmerized. I'm like, what? What the fuck happened? Where's the death grunts from the first three releases?
Yeah, there's very little ooh going on in this album, right? A couple songs. Right?
It's just this, and I'm like, oh my God, dude. I mean, I tried listening to this again last night twice, and both times I had to skip through the tracks. I'm like, I didn't really like it in '87. Some people love it. It was a hit. They did the Anthrax tour. I saw them on that tour. Thankfully, they played some great old stuff, but it's the vocals that really kill it for me on this record.
Yeah. I had a really hard time with number 4 and number 5 because I basically the same reason you did. I ultimately, because I have a bit of history with Into the Pandemonium, and a lot of history, I should say, I decided to rate Vanity Nemesis from 1990 number five. I think it works better overall as an album than Into the Pandemonium does, but there are like a handful of tracks on Into the Pandemonium that I love. So I ranked it higher, but Vanity Nemesis is really good. I mean, again, this, they needed to figure shit out after Cold Lake, right? So they come back 2 years later. They have it's kind of a thrashy album. There's a lot of thrash going on this album.
Yeah.
There's that gothic feel. There's some classic metal sounds. Thankfully, none of the kind of glam metal thing like they did on Cold Lake. But there's some good stuff on here. The Heart Beneath is a really great song.
Oh, yeah.
Wine in My Hand is
that's terrific. A great track.
Wings of Solitude is kind of slow and doomy. Almost sounds like My Dying Bride in spots.
Oh, very much so. Yeah.
Right. What else? Name of My Bride. You got the cover of that Brian Ferry song, This Island Earth. Restless Seas is good. Phallic Tantrum. Pretty
it's another really good one. The Bowie cover, Heroes.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep. And the two title tracks, Vanity and Nemesis, are also really good. It's a very solid record. Part of me wanted to rank it one higher. I'll explain why, the next album, I rank a little bit higher next, but yeah, the rest of these are all really good albums, I think, for me.
Yeah. Things start to pick up. Yeah, that was my next one was Vanity. Here's the original, and here's the reissue. And yeah, I just it's to me it's not as annoying as some of the stuff on Into the Pandemonium. And to me, Into the Pandemonium was the beginning of the letdown, which then Cold Lake furthered, where to me, I was already so let down that when I heard Vanity Nemesis, I was like, oh, this is a pop back in the right direction. Unfortunately, it still didn't do much for their career. No. I remember when the greatest hits or odds and sods compilation came out. What's it called? Parched with Thirst, Am I for Dying? Yeah. I remember I went to see them in New York City. They were opening for one of the SOD reunions, and they canceled. So yeah, they never made it to the States for Vanity Nemesis. Then that was shortly after the band. That was it.
Yeah, if I remember correctly, from talking and hanging out with Reed for all those years. I remember that was supposed to be like the big reunion. So he got together with Tom and with Martin, and they were writing again. In fact, if you looked at that compilation, there's a couple of new songs on there that all three of them co-wrote together, and they were actually going to go out and as the reformed Celtic Frost, and it wound up not happening.
Right.
For all sorts of various reasons. But
sure.
Yeah. My number 4, I'm going to go with Into the Pandemonium. I was really into this when it came out. So yeah, again, you can see Tom starting to tease the hair there. The other two, Martin and Reed still look basically the same on here. But yeah, this is a weird mix of styles. You've got kind of like doomy stuff on here. You got that like early extreme metal.
Female vocals.
Female vocals. It's very avant-garde. I mean, this is just a really weird album.
It's a weird record.
It really works. There's a lot of gothic flavors on. The vocals on 4 or 5 of the tracks, I just don't.
Just kills me.
Yeah, and I remember when this came out, a lot of us were like, "Is that Tom?
Yeah.
How can that be Tom? That doesn't sound like Tom." And we really like, because you didn't have a lot of information back in that day, other than looking at the album.
I mean, there was no internet. You couldn't just Google it and be like, what's going on this record? I mean, you had to buy a magazine, and I hope they had an interview with Tom G. Warrior.
Yeah, it's like there's no way Tom could be doing that whiny, like, whatever the kind of voice it is. I don't know, whatever.
I don't know.
Yeah, I will say, on the plus side, they do a cover of Mexican Radio, but
it's not terrible.
It blows away the original, in my opinion. I dig it.
It's not terrible. It shouldn't be the opener.
No, it shouldn't be the opener. Babylon Fell is one of my favorite songs.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great track.
That is so freaking heavy.
Inner Sanctum's a good one.
Babylon Fell, and there you get the ooh. You got plenty of them in that song. Inner Sanctum is so good. Caress into Oblivion is really cool as well. But then you get all the weird stuff like Mesmerized.
Yeah.
And One in Their Pride is a really weird song.
Oh, that's that weird rap thing. And then there's that song with the French title with the girls doing whatever.
Yeah, it's just really, and then I Won't Dance. It's like, I don't know. Like I said, half the album I really like a lot. The other half is just really weird. But I think I like the half so much. And because I listened to this a ton back in the day, that's why I ranked this a little bit higher than Vanity Nemesis.
Makes sense.
But I think if you were to ask me honestly, I think Vanity Nemesis is a stronger album.
Yeah.
Top to bottom, without a doubt. So, all right, number 3.
All right, number 3. This one was their comeback record in 2006, and I had the chance to interview Tom G. Warrior and Martin Eric Ain in the city, but before it was released, and it was one of my favorite interviews I've ever done, and it's Monotheist. An unbelievable comeback record. I mean, in the realm of comeback records, I would certainly put this towards the top. It's definitely not as fast paced as the earlier Frost material, but it's so agonizingly heavy. And I think it just works. The production, some of the songs are a little long, but I think it was a great heavy comeback record, and it was the comeback that they needed.
Yeah.
And even still, lots of people couldn't give up the Cold Lake mistake. No, unfortunately.
Yeah.
And I caught them a number of times headlining on this tour, as well as opening up for Typo Negative, and I saw them on a few European festivals too. And I saw them in the 80s, but seeing them in the 2000s was even better.
Yeah. And I remember the set list was terrific.
Oh. Yeah.
So it's also my number 3. And I've told the story before, but I'll tell it again for those folks who haven't heard me say it. So like Chris, I also got to interview Tom specifically when this album was ready to be released. The folks from Century Media were like, "Hey, you want to interview Tom G. Warrior?" And I was like, "Yeah." So like I said, I lived in the same town with Reed St. Mark, and we became really good friends. We went to the same gym together. That's where we met, actually. So, I got to know Reed very well. And then one day I was like, "Yeah, I'm supposed to be interviewing Tom in a couple days." He's like, "Oh, really?" He's like, "Man, I haven't talked to Tom in like, however what years this was, what 2005, 2006.
2005, yeah.
So they hadn't talked in like 15 years or something like that, right? Because they talked during the making of the that compilation
the
album
90s,
yeah. So it was whatever it was, 10 years, 12 years, 15 years, whatever. So he's like, oh my God, I haven't talked to him in so long. And I was sitting there thinking, and I'm like, how would you like to kind of sit in on the interview? He's like, oh, I would love that. I was like, why don't we do this? I said, why don't, when I go to interview Tom, because back then we were doing everything was all phone interviews, right? So I said, would you come over to my house? We'll get Tom on the phone and we'll have him on speakerphone. And then like maybe halfway during the interview, I will say, I've got an old friend of yours sitting here next to me. And that's exactly what we did. So I'm sitting there talking to Tom. We're talking about the album. It's going really good. Reed's sitting right next to me. And then I was like, yeah, I got an old friend sitting here. He goes, what old friend? And then Reed chimes in. He goes, hello, old friend. And Tom is like deathly silent. And Reed starts giggling. And Tom goes, you're fucking shitting me.
That's awesome.
And Reed's like, no, it's me. It's Reed. He goes, oh my God. And they hadn't talked to each other in like over a decade. So it was really cool. So then when we went to the show in New York City at BB King's, I went with Reed and his girlfriend, and it was, they did the meet and greet, right? So Tom comes out, Martin comes out, and then all three of them are hugging and embracing. And then Reed introduces me to Tom. He's like, this is Peter Pardo from Sea of Tranquility. And he looks at me, he goes, you're the guy who did this, right? I'm like, yes, indeed. So it was just really cool to see them getting back together after all those years. And, the plan was going forward is that Reed was going to get involved with the early Triptychon stuff, but it wound up not happening. But yeah, it was just, it was kind of cool to be a part of that little family and that
is super cool.
All that history, so it's pretty cool. But yeah, back to the Monotheist. I love this album. This is such a heavy album. I love the production on it. I mean, the riffs are massive and angry and just doomy, and his voice. I mean, he sounds like, it's almost like he wanted to take the Cold Lake stuff and just like everybody just forget that. This is what I always should have done. And just, I mean, Progeny. I mean, God. A dying God.
A dying God coming into human flesh. I mean, that title alone, is that like the heaviest title ever?
Yeah, it's just great. How about the song Ground? Oh God, why have you forsaken me? I mean, it's just like, I remember seeing him play that live, and it's just, everybody was just so into it. I mean, this is just if it wasn't for the two albums we're going to talk about, this could be the number one. And it wouldn't surprise me if a lot of people watching might list this as their favorite one, because this is just an absolutely amazing album. And to me, this is like an avant-garde doom album. Forget the early black metal stuff and all that. This is doom. I mean, it's just so heavy. And then you got the triptych thing at the end, which I think was basically the start of the whole idea to do something called Triptychon. But yeah, it's kind of a shame that this was it for Celtic Frost.
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately.
Yeah, and now Martin's no longer with us, and I guess probably it's for the best, maybe. But
yeah, I mean, you can never tarnish the legacy, because they did go out on such a high note.
True, and it's funny, like we did a show on the Hudson Valley Squares a little while ago where we talked about those greatest final albums. Totally forgot to think of this one, because that's one of the best last albums from a band ever, right? And
I mean, to me, this kind of is sort of like, well, no matter how great any of those Merciful Fate reunion records were, they could never top Melissa and Don't Break the Oath. And to me, it's kind of like, well, as great as this is, it still can't touch the predecessors that came before it.
No, and again, it's because, I mean, we talk about this all the time here. You have like so much history with some of these albums. So yeah, you stack this up with the other two we're going to talk about, and to some people, like let's just say someone who's maybe now 25 years old, they hear this and this and this at the same time. They don't have the history with these two like you and I do, right?
100%.
To them, they'd be like, oh, Monotheist is the greatest thing they've ever done, because it's all new to them, right?
I mean, it's like I often say with the Star Wars movies, somebody that's watching them all today might absolutely fall in love with the prequels or the sequels, whereas people like me and you, you could never top that original trilogy.
Yeah. True.
So absolutely.
Yeah. So in saying all that, we for those watching who maybe have not heard a lot of these albums, or Monotheist is
It's a
absolutely,
great record.
it's great. Yeah. So if you wanted to start there and kind of work your way back, I wouldn't argue against that at all.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And,
Cool.
and having said that, my number two, it was I had to listen to them both again because it's a tough one.
It is.
But ultimately, I'm like, all right, I'm going with, and I have 2 or 3 copies of this. I don't have it in front of me. I'm going with two Mega Therion for my number 2 record. I think they're both equally amazing. They both sound great. They're you know, heavy riffs, great songwriting. I think just when I stack the two of them together, I think I just liked songs better on the debut, which was Morbid Tales. And I do always hate though that they changed the skull on the CD reissue. I mean they're both amazing records, but to Mega Therion just slightly under Morbid Tales.
Okay. I went the other way. So I went,
And you could listen. I could change that if I keep listening to both of them.
yeah, I went with Morbid Tales as my number 2. It's amazing. And again, just look how like kind of raw and just
yeah.
like lo-fi. And that just, I mean, the picture of them, I wish I could, just totally looks like the album sounds.
Totally. Yep.
And it's just and we talked before about the Emperor's Return EP, which those songs are then ported over for this CD release. But yeah, I mean, this is just great stuff. It's so out there and different for the time, and evil sounding and raw and primal, and just what is it? Is it early death metal? Is it early black metal? Or is it neither? And it's
certainly an influence on both.
Yeah,
I mean,
right.
I know. I remember one of the times I interviewed Obituary guitarist Trevor Perez told me that he listened to Celtic Frost, but specifically Hellhammer. He's like every day.
Yeah, it's just groundbreaking stuff that there was nothing like this at the time.
Yeah.
Nothing. Into Crypts Arrays, I mean, it's just amazing. Death Roaned Impera is just such a great song. Title track, Procreation of the Wicked, Visions of Mortality. I mean, every song on here is just kick ass and great.
Yeah,
I mean, such a groundbreaking different band. So yeah, that's my number 2. But
yeah, I mean, you got Into the Crypts Arrays, which is super fast, and then Procreation of the Wicked, which is
heavy,
slow and heavy and doomy. Yeah, just amazing stuff.
And his guitar tone on these, like especially the first 2 albums, or even just the first album, because I think the second album has a little more richer production, but it's just like a buzzsaw.
It's just scathing. And to me, what I always liked more about Celtic Frost and Hellhammer is the riffs are very like Sabbath-like, and the riffs are just so much more pronounced in Celtic Frost over Hellhammer.
Yeah, big time. And you almost wonder too, because again, Tom was not a lead player by any means. Right. He was a riff guy. And when he would go and play a solo in some of these songs, it's just really rudimentary stuff. He would step on the wah-wah pedal and just do like a hammer on over and over and over and over and over again. And it's like, it was still kind of cool sounding, even though all right, this guy is not a lead guitar player, but man, he came up with some of the coolest riffs on those first 3 albums.
Amazing.
Yeah. So all right. So yeah, number 1 for you is Morbid Tales.
Yeah, my number 1 would be Morbid Tales. Again, it was really close. I just I liked some of the tracks overall more on Morbid Tales. But to me, it's one of those records. It's one of those double features. It's the 1-2 punch of Heaven and Hell and Mob Rules, or Melissa and Don't Break the Oath, or even Iron Maiden and Killers. It's like, oh, which one's better? God, I'm not quite sure. It's a hair away.
Yeah, it is. It definitely is. And I went with this one. Great H.R. Geiger or Giger, however he says his name. Artwork there. This is Reed's first album with the band on drums, and he kills it on here. He's such a thunderous drummer, right? Although
Oh, amazing.
he's got a jazz background, right? I mean, so that's, you know, he always told me one of his frustrations in playing with a band like this is he was used to playing like jazz and jazz fusion music, which is a lot more subtle and intricate. And then, you know, here you got this big, heavy, bombastic avant-garde stuff, right? But great stuff on here. The Usurper, Jewel Throne, Circle of the Tyrants, Dawn of Megadu. So out there, so cool. Necromantical Screams, which I think that song kind of foreshadows some of the stuff that they would start to do.
And this one has Dance Macabre, right? Which to me always reminded me of, you know, and if I ever interview Tom G. Warrior again, I got to ask him, all right, how much of an influence was the band Goblin with the Suspiria soundtrack?
Yeah.
To that track.
Yeah, good. That's a good point. Yep, good point. But great stuff on here. Yeah. And I like, you know, was they would throw like French horn on occasionally, right? You get these big boom, 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 and you hear the horn in the background. It's just like, who was doing shit like this? Nobody.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then, of course, those great Tom G. Warrior, you know, grunts, you know, ooh, all the time. He would throw those in every song. It's like, you're just waiting for it. I'm waiting for it, you know? It's like, yeah, great stuff.
Yeah.
So a very cool band. So if you have never listened to Celtic Frost before,
you certainly should.
Certainly should. You know, your question might be, well, where do I start? Well, I think we just kind of told you. So
yeah, those three,
you know, Monotheist, Morbid Tales, into Mega Therion. All three are absolutely amazing. There's plenty of stuff to recommend on the other three, but these three are without a doubt the cream of the crop. I mean, it doesn't get much better than this.
No doubt.
So, cool. So for those of you who are Celtic Frost fans, please rank them as you like them in the comments below. And I'm sure we're going to get questions. Well, where would you slot in the Hellhammer album, and where would you slot in the Triptychon album? Right. Interesting question. Maybe we'll revisit this.
Do a Tom G. Warrior discography at some point.
So, but those are both fine albums as well too. And then the Hellhammer stuff is also pretty legendary, and that's even more kind of out there and extreme than the Morbid Tales album. But it's funny because you listen to like starting there and you listen all the way up, you can kind of see the progression.
Oh, totally.
Took, you know, so
absolutely.
Cool. So thanks for watching, everybody. Visit us on the web at www.seaoftranquility.org. We're on Facebook, we're on Twitter. Of course, we're here on YouTube.
All the damn time.
All the damn time. Stay tuned tomorrow morning, bright and early. Myself and Martin Popoff at the Funhouse for part 2 of our look at those albums that came right before the big one. So cool albums by pretty notable bands who had a mega blockbuster album. Well, what about that album that came right before it? How does that one stack up against the big blockbuster album? Part 2 of that is coming up tomorrow morning here. We've also got another day of forgotten favorites for me first thing in the morning as well. So I'll be busy bright and early when the sun's rising tomorrow morning. Hopefully I get a few hours sleep tonight so I can do that tomorrow morning. But we'll get through it. So Chris will be away next week, so we won't see him on Hudson Valley Squares or the Monsters Den, but he'll be back with a vengeance the week after that. So stay tuned for that. I hope you have a good time, my friend.
Thank you. Yeah. And we'll catch you the week after.
Sounds good. So thanks for watching, everybody, and have a good night, and we'll see you real soon. Take care. For Chris Alo, I am Pete Pardo. Bye-bye.